Ready? 2. You know, when I call 2, you guys can face press royal. Back face, then forward, mark. Get out of here. Then you gotta go check these 2 right here.
Those are lower right. Master Sergeant's lower than Master.
So 1, 2, 3.
Well,
I'd like to welcome members of the public to share in this dedication to the RA-3 Skywarrior and honoring the work and dedication of the volunteers and the support of the A3 Skywarrior Association. Without the support of the volunteers, the donors, and those who donated in kind, whether going on their own dime to pick up parts or transporting the aircraft here, we owe you all a debt of gratitude. Thank you so much, and at this moment, I'll turn it over to CPO Autore.
Ladies and gentlemen, please give your attention as we formally welcome aboard our distinguished guests and the presentation of the colors. Color Guard, present colors.
left, face, present, colors. Ready, 2. Ready, face. Post, colors. Ready, 2. Ready, face. Forward, mark.
Ladies and gentlemen, please give your attention as we formally welcome aboard our distinguished guests. First, representing the Skywalker Association, AE2 Rick Liebermann, U.S. Navy, arriving. Representing the restoration team at the museum, Master Sergeant Bill Hiller, U.S. Air Force, arriving. Master Chief Mike Glenn, U.S. Navy, arriving. Commander Ron Woltman, U.S. Navy, arriving.
Please uncover. Heavenly Father, as we gather here today, young and old, friends and family on this Memorial Day weekend, we thank you for giving strength and courage to those who have come before us, who have given their all to provide for the freedoms we enjoy. As we gather to dedicate the presence of this aircraft now in our collection, we gather in the knowledge that we are not here to honor this as a vehicle of war, but to gather to remember our shipmates who gave their lives in doing their duty for their country. We ask your blessings on the families of those who gave their lives, those still living with the pains of prior service, and those who are still serving in support of our freedoms around the world today. In your name, amen.
Amen.
I'd like to pass it on to Joe Pruzzo, Director of the Museum, for introducing our guests.
We definitely are graced with some distinguished guests today of the A3 Association. Back about 2009, there were 4 A3s at Mojave Airport in Mojave, California. Of those 4 aircraft, this is the only one that was preserved. It was preserved because of the diligence and dedication of our volunteer restoration team. Without their support and technical knowledge, and without the support of the A3 Association, A3 members, and members who donated to this project, we wouldn't be standing here today. This airplane would be razor blades, basically. You can imagine what it was like when our volunteers were taking this apart, gingerly trying to preserve it, to put it back together on site. Well, across the runway, about a half a mile away, there were 3 of her sisters that were being chopped to pieces by excavators. And in about 30 minutes, they were all gone. So this is a lasting legacy to the United States Navy, our veterans, our nation, and this museum. I'd like to welcome some distinguished guests. Mr. Ron Woltman, I believe Chief Pilot at Raytheon, who helped us acquire the airplane through the Navy and helped us immensely with some fundraising and acquiring parts for the airplane. Mr. Mike Glenn, thank you very much. Met Mike. He's one of their Edwards Air Force Base or Flight Test Center Museum volunteers and was responsible for restoring an A3 at Edwards Air Force Base, which was a test airplane, a straight bomber version of this aircraft. And Mr. Rick Liebermann, who came up from the Los Angeles area. And this aircraft is marked in VAP 61 markings, so it'll be a lasting testament to the sacrifices of a photographic mission to help defend the United States of America. Just to let you know, 2 of her sister ships went down over Vietnam in the Ho Chi Minh Trail. So without further ado, I'd like to bring on Mr. Ron Woltman of Raytheon. Please welcome him.
Thanks very much for all of you. I really feel honored. I'm sure I speak for Mike as well. It's really an honor to be part of this dedication today on the RA3. you can kind of see the accomplishments here by the Restoration Center. The restoration team here are just absolutely phenomenal. Particularly had you seen this airplane when they got it up in Mojave. It's quite a sight to look at. I think most of the restoration guys, or some of them, are sitting around here wearing hats. Maybe we can just give them a big round of applause for everything that they did. On display is, I believe, Joe, I believe this is probably the only photo A3 we'll ever see in a museum anywhere. All the rest of them have been lost in one regard or another. So this is really quite a treat. Quite a treat for CASA to be able to get a hold of this airplane and restore this and display it in recognition for all the photo air crews and maintainers that kept these airplanes going for years. The A3, if anybody doesn't know, was originally designed as a nuclear bomber, carrier-based nuclear bomber, strategic nuclear bomber. Biggest airplane on the carrier, and it probably remains the biggest, heaviest, largest airplane to ever operate on a carrier. It was used in Vietnam as a tanker, along with the versions that supported electronic warfare, photo missions, and electronic surveillance. It's a great performing airplane. Probably in its day, it was one of the faster airplanes out there. It was really hard to keep up with. Even when it was retired in '91, I believe, is when they retired all of the A3s, the last of the A3s. It was still one of the fastest non-afterburning airplanes in the Navy. It was really hard to keep up with this thing. This one has kind of a unique history. It served in the Navy until in a VAP squadron. It was a 61 and was one of the squadrons it served in. And in the late 70s, I believe it was retired from the Navy. It was given to Raytheon as a test bed. In the early 80s, Raytheon started testing the Patriot missile system on this airplane, and because it was an Army program, the Navy turned this airplane over to the Army and basically took it off their active records. And so this airplane served as probably the only jet aircraft the Army ever owned, if they even knew they owned one, until about the mid-90s somewhere. The Patriot missile system program came to an end. The airplane came back to the Navy, and then Raytheon started flying it again for some internal programs. This airplane was transferred out of Bedford, where Raytheon was operating it. They brought it out to California and consolidated it with our Raytheon flight test organization out in California. And then it was parked in Mojave for long-term storage, and unfortunately never flew again. So in 2009 is when Castle ended up getting the airplane from the Navy and bringing it up here to restore it. It's quite an airplane, quite a legacy, and I am just absolutely proud to have been one of the many, many air crew that were allowed to, permitted to fly this airplane. Thanks for everybody for showing up here today.
Well, next I'd like to welcome Mr. Mike Glenn, who scrounges a lot of parts for us. And matter of fact, the refueling probe you see on there, he and another gentleman, friend of his, went to Key West and took off a Hangar Queen airplane down there that was going to be cut up. So they traveled down there and did an excellent job of getting that to us, shipping it out, so the airplane aesthetically is complete. So I'd like to turn it over to Mike a little bit. He can give you a little perspective on that and some other things.
Thank you, Joe. I'd like to welcome everybody and really appreciate the fact that people are interested in some of these old airplanes and some of us old guys that have been around here doing this kind of stuff. I'm going to give you a little history on the airplane itself. Bear with me because some of you are interested in this, some may not be, but after World War II, the Navy got into requiring a nuclear-capable airplane that could be based off an aircraft carrier in order to be able to keep the Russians in the Cold War in check. The airplane was specified that it had to carry a 10,000-pound nuclear weapon, which the Fat Boy that was dropped on Nagasaki was a 9,600-pound weapon, so the 10,000 pounds was there. The Navy was anticipating putting the airplane on the USS United States, which was a brand new class of aircraft carrier, and they specified a 100,000-pound airplane for that carrier. Now, to put this into perspective, if you guys looked at that relic SPD that Castle is going to tackle here, good luck with that, and some of the other World War II airplanes that are around, a 100,000-pound airplane was just not even in existence. There was nothing that big. Most of the carrier airplanes in those days were 15, 18,000-pound airplanes, so this was an order of magnitude bigger. Plus, it was jet. Oh my gosh, you know, that was brand new. The brilliant Ed Heinemann for Douglas was the designer who developed and they responded to the specification the Navy put out. And Mr. Heinemann, who was very astute in Navy, the way the Navy operated and the things that were going on, he did not believe the SS United States was ever going to be built post-World War II because it was too expensive to build. So he kept the airplane under 80,000 pounds, and they worked very hard to keep it below 80,000 pounds with the size of the airplane. The max gross weight of these guys, by the time it was all over and done with, was 78,000 pounds. So that was quite a feat for him to get that done and still meet the specs. And he turned out to be right. The SS United States got canceled, was never built. The airplanes had to be put aboard the Midway class carrier, which was a lot smaller than the SS United States ever planned on being. And so Douglas won the competition because everybody else's airplane was too heavy for the Midway. So this was Douglas's model 593-8 for all of you purists who want to know that kind of stuff, if you care. But in July 1949, a contract was given to Douglas to build this airplane. Now think about that. 1949. This airplane is designed in 1949. Ron flew the last airplane to Pensacola, made the last flight in the A3 to Pensacola in 2010. That's not too bad. That airplane lasted a long time. Some of the design criteria that turned out to be extremely successful was the high shoulder-mounted wing up top, because on the original airplane it provided fuselage space for the 10,000-pound bomb, for a big bomb bay to be in existence. And it had to be accessible in flight because in those days the weapons had to be armed prior to being dropped in flight. You didn't take off with an armed weapon. So a crewman, they had to depressurize the cockpit. Crewman had to climb in the back and arm the weapon. And so that bomb bay had access in flight. The sweep back of the wing is there because of the speed requirements. This turned out to be a .88 Mach airplane, which was, you know, I mean, totally unheard of. I mean, this is the days of piston-driven propeller airplanes, you know. So this was quite a step forward. The engine nacelles, the way you can see how the nacelle is hung on the bottom of the wing, they improved aerodynamic drag, were designed to facilitate maintenance, and it provided a way to use a different engine if necessary, and that turned out to be the case. The airplane was designed to use the Westinghouse J40. The J40 was unsuccessful, never became a production engine, and the engine was changed over to a J57, so the nacelle allowed that changeover relatively simply for the airplane to do it. First flight of the A3 airplane occurred at Edwards Air Force Base, October 28, 1952. So these are kind of an old airplane here. The two prototypes were developed along with 12 pre-production airplanes that were authorized before the prototypes had even completed flight test. Additional 38 A3D-1s were built that were straight bomber airplanes capable of carrying the nuclear weapon. None of these airplanes had the in-flight refueling capability or any any really trick stuff. They were just bombers. As the airplane got into service, it was pretty robust, and it turned out to be pretty successful. It broke several distance and endurance records for the Navy because, you know, piston airplanes only flew so far. This thing could fly 5.5 hours at 400 and 500 miles an hour, so, you know, it was pretty successful. So several of the early ones were modified for various special type prototypes, including a photo airplane. The package that was in the photo airplane was relatively successful and was very useful, but it was one of a kind. So as the Navy continued, they developed the A3D2, which had slightly bigger engines and a little more thrust, a little different wing structure and stuff. And some of the A3D2 bombers, or most of the A3D bombers, were fitted as tankers. During Vietnam, the KA-3B, which was the tanker airplane, and the EKA-3B, which was an ECM airplane with a tanker package in it, these were Bombay airplanes, were the Navy's tanker of choice because they could operate from the carrier. Wherever the carrier went, you had your own tanker with you. So it was pretty cool. Then they started developing versions, and they developed A3D2P, 2Q, and 2Ts. This one is a P airplane, photo airplane. The windows that you see on the side, and they've displayed them with the doors open so that you can see the camera windows. They were, because the Bombay no longer was needed for a photo airplane, so they developed a different pressurized crew compartment, took the airplane up to a 7.5 pressure differential than the cabin pressure versus the 3 of the older models. And a lot of changes to the lower escape system. The airplane still never had ejection seats in it throughout its life. It would have been too costly and too expensive to change it. Mr. Woltman used to tell all of our engineering guys that flew with us the reason there's any airplanes left is because of that escape system. Nobody wanted to use it, so you brought the airplane back home. You know. Anyway, accessory drive units were relocated up to the nose. Those vents in the side are for the accessory drive units that drive generators and hydraulic pumps. Main wheel brakes were improved compared to the older airplanes. This one was they had quite a universal camera system in them. They had capability for the onboard technician to change all the cameras or film cartridges in flight. They had 12 camera mounts, 16 camera ports, 33 camera positions, and a short Bombay for flash bay cartridges and electronic flashes. So these airplanes were really in demand for reconnaissance because the carrier could get in very close and they could launch this airplane off the carrier and get their reconnaissance done. Pilot had a forward-looking viewfinder and could operate cameras like the oblique camera that's down there on the nose, and he could control that and operate cameras. 30 airframes were produced as A3D2Ps, like this one here, and the last one was accepted in 1960. Airplane, unfortunately, had a pretty good loss record. There were a total of 11, or 35% of the 30 airplanes built that were lost to accidents. 6 of those were combat losses during Vietnam. You got to remember the strikes would go in, and then the reconnaissance airplanes would come in to take pictures of the strike damage. And so by the time these guys came in, everybody was awake. And it was really kind of the guys that flew these things had large cojones. As the wind down of the Vietnam War, the airplanes were converted. A lot of them were converted into various flight testing positions, like this one was. And 12 of the remaining aircraft were converted into ERAs, which are electronic reconnaissance airplane. And they were used for shipboard electronic countermeasures training. So they had, because of the high speed and the high capability, high speed, low altitude capability, they could attack the fleet and simulate being bad guys and simulate being cruise missiles and stuff. Worked pretty well. This airplane, once it was bailed to Raytheon, as Ron had said, developed the SAM-D missile system, which was the Patriot Defense System. This airplane would carry the electronics of the missile and fly the profiles as though it were simulating being the missile. So it was very useful to help develop all of that Patriot missile system. For those of you old enough to remember the Gulf War, the Patriot system was extremely successful in taking a lot of the Scuds down. And so this guy has its own set of stripes, and it's a real Patriot of its own. This airplane was saved from destruction by the guys at Castle, and the beautiful restoration that you see is a labor of love. And I've done a couple of these things, and let me tell you, when you get about 10,000 man-hours into a restoration like this, that's a lot of time and a lot of cut knuckles and cursing and swearing and stuff. Not that any of us ever did that, right, guys? No, see, they're all agreeing with me. Anyway, this airplane has got a lasting legacy. Castle has done a beautiful restoration of it. We of the A3 Association are extremely proud of our association with Castle, and we would urge all of you to continue to support all of your museums, including Castle and any other museums that happen to be in your neighborhood, because the people that do these kinds of things really love doing what they do. Thank you very much.
Okay, and our third guest here is Rick Liebermann, who came up from Los Angeles, part of the A3 Association. I got a call one day and said, I understand you have an A3, and I'm really excited about it and would like to come up and take a look at it. Matter of fact, he was part of this squadron, so it's near and dear to him. So I'll turn the mic over for a few words from Mr. Liebermann.
I did not expect this, everybody. During the benediction, I was struck by the grace of God, and a few of these airplanes and some friends were here. I was part of this squadron from late 65 to 70 almost. Some of my squadron mates are here. Baker, Schomburg, come on up, please. Just wave your hand. The long-haired guy over there is one, the white guy in a white shirt. Bailey's here. Mr. Dudek right here was a crewman. This airplane is a workhorse. This very airplane was with most of us in the audience today in Guam, where we were based, Subic Bay, Philippines, Da Nang, Vietnam for a whole long time, Townsville, Australia, where we helped map the country for the Aussies, and some of us had the fortuitous strike in life to go out to the USS Enterprise in a plane like this. I'm not sure if this one went out to the Enterprise. But it's a big airplane and a squirrely airplane. Commander can probably attest to this more than me. But what I want to tell you about is a couple of non-intended missions that happened with an airplane just like this, and maybe this is one of them, I don't know. A good friend of ours is a captain named Jack Nichols, who I asked to come today, but he's on a cruise, of all things, a Navy guy going on a cruise with his wife. He was flying an airplane just like this. Baker, you probably remember the number, is it? Do you remember? When he was too low? Anyway, he was over North Vietnam in 67, I think, or 8. I should know the answer to that. And if you see how high that tree is right behind you over there, part of the activity of this airplane is to fly real high and take a lot of pictures, and part of it's to bug people real low, like he was saying a minute ago. Well, Jack Nichols in his radar intercept, what do we call him now? What do we call a right C?
A bombardier.
His nickname was Drift. If you have no navigator named Drift, you don't want to get in the plane. Well, hey, Jack Nichols, now captain, retired. He and Drift were flying around North Vietnam someplace, and Jack tells the story to all of us that he just felt like it was a little low and a little dark on the port side, the left side. So he turned right, just because he was doing terrain following, low areas. He got back to Da Nang and went to the debriefing Quonset hut. And John Baker, standing right over there, took this little piece of wood into Jack and took it out of that leading edge wing slat right there, the white leading edge. So he was that low and probably hit a tree like that somewhere in North Vietnam. So weird stuff happens like that. One of the other unintended missions we did, a couple of us flew this out to the Enterprise, which is then the Navy's largest nuclear-powered aircraft carrier. By the way, it just retired like 2 months ago, I think. So we were out there 5 or 6 weeks, and we're starting to get a little thirsty. So again, troublemaker John Baker over here sent a note into Schomburg in Da Nang, Vietnam. He said, could you please put a couple of cases of San Miguel beer in the hell hole in the back of that airplane? So he did. And we got a little trouble because on arrested landing, don't forget these come in at 130 knots, come in, more or less on approach. Boom, you hit a wire. Well, taxiing off, the guys in the green shirts and the red shirts and all these other shirts on the flight deck who haven't had a beer in 2 months, they go, Smells like beer. So leaking out of that, if you go on the other side, there's a little square pan that lifts up. There were 2 cases of beer in there. We got a little Dutch for trying to import beer, but it all went well. And I also want to thank Joe. Thank you for inviting me. And these men and women here, you guys are masters. This plane and Indian blanket never looked this good in its life. I don't think, coming out of McDonald's. Anyway, thank you so much.
Well, this concludes this part of the ceremony. CPO Autore, I'd like to bring her back, and we'll do a little something special in remembrance of the aircraft that were lost.
Aircraft 144843 was painted in the markings of VAP 61 in memory of the squadron sustaining the most losses during the Vietnam conflict. In honor of those crew members, we will be performing a flag passing ceremony. Crew 144842. Crew 144830. Crew 144828.
Okay, well, I have to get off the phone that, I say hang up. Yeah.
Crew 144835.
When you get home, I'm going with, Billy.
Crew 144844. Crew 144847. Restoration Chief, is aircraft 144843 ready for display? Cadets, bring her to life. Ladies and gentlemen, Quiz Show 13 is ready for viewing. Welcome aboard.
At this time, those of you who entered the raffle for the 100th anniversary of Naval Aviation memorabilia, we will draw the tickets and the winners. I will bestow that honor. Sir? Sir, would you draw the winners? Okay. Okay, looks like Keith Blackie. Okay, number 0056. Congratulations.
Whoa!
Thank you very much. Again, I want to thank the A3 Association, all the A3 crew members, past, present, and to our restoration team, and also to Jameson Harvesting for their help in facilitating getting this airplane here. If you can imagine this airplane, the 76-foot-long gray fuselage coming up Highway 99 garnered a lot of looks. So thank you so much, and enjoy the rest of Cockpit Day.
ضوءها انت هكا لك هيا
Come on, we got a lot to see.
And he was outside of the Great and Ground Father, which is about 20 miles. So he was there, you know, in the 60s. And you see him there about 50 miles before you. So, and we didn't know much about it. They didn't give us any information. I was with the Hawaii National Guard. I tried to find it out.
We're doing already. We started to that.
I call it finding in the bush. Wow, I got lots of pictures of airplanes and stuff.
Ready? Yep. Fire in the hole!